Children in Belize are subjected to the worst forms of child labor, including in commercial sexual exploitation, sometimes as a result of human trafficking. Children also engage in dangerous tasks in agriculture and construction. That's according to the U.S. Department of Labor's 2022 report on child labor.
Okay, in terms of child labor worldwide, we have 168 million children in child labor. And so that is very important for us to note. And therefore, we need to ensure that in Belize, we reduce child labor. In 2003, there were statistical information in terms of child labor there. And so it was found that child labor is prevalent in the agricultural sector. And so it did identify that Belize is prevalent to child labor.
According to the report, 1.6% of the population, or 1,405 children, ages 5 to 14, are working. 1.2% work and go to school. They are working in agriculture, industry, and services. While the report says that children over age 14 are permitted to work in dangerous activities like mining and construction, Labor Commissioner Risela Dominguez-Pat says they shouldn't be.
First of all, because of the Minimum Age Convention, you must understand at what age a child can work and what kind of work the child can do during that age. So therefore, the convention applies for different ages, but in Belize, the minimum age to work is 14 years old. But you can only work in shop. You cannot work anywhere else. And you can only do light work. And so, also, if a child the child can assist a parent at home, anything that intervenes with the child's education would be considered child labor. The agriculture sector was the one that was most prevalent. But in today, we can see that it has reduced because of fair trade. And so they have their own agreements whereby you must ensure that there is no child labor. And so they're working very arduously to eliminate child labor in those sectors. But definitely, we can still find child labor in the agriculture sector. And that this is only one scenario. We could talk about the worst forms of child labor, which could be human trafficking, pornography, which are the worst forms of child labor, which we might not be able to see on a day-to-day, but we may know that it does exist.
Assisting a parent is not considered child labor, but if the child is unsupervised and conducting hazardous work, then that is considered child labor. Back in March of this year, a child labor training was held to build the capacity of frontline workers in an effort to eradicate child labor.
You know, on a global level, we see increases in child labor for the region, particularly for Latin America, and even for us in Belize. We are seeing that there is a reduction in the forms of child labor. And I want to say that as a government, we are being very proactive since taking over government. In July, we actually developed a very comprehensive child labor policy. And, we are working very diligently with our labor officers across the country and other stakeholders, our frontline, workers. And that is why we're having this training, because we want them to fully understand what is the child labor policy that we have, and what is their role in ensuring that the child labor policy is implemented and that we reduce all forms of child labor by 2025.
Belize has ratified all key international conventions concerning child labor, but the report says that gaps exist in the country's legal framework to adequately protect children from the worst forms of child labor, including a lack of prohibitions related to the use of children in the production and trafficking of drugs.
But prior to last year, we have ratified different conventions. Convention 138, which is the Minimum Age Convention, and we have also ratified Convention 182, which is the worst forms of child labor. And so because we are a member state and we have ratified these conventions, then we must ensure that we comply by these.
The Ministry of Labor, the Department of Human Services, and the Belize Police Department are the agencies responsible for the enforcement of child labor laws.
This policy was developed with consultation with various stakeholders. And so in terms of child labor, it's not only the Labor Department, but it's different entities that are responsible to reducing child labor by 2025. And so the policy clearly identifies which other ministries or institutions play a role in this policy to ensure that the child labor is reduced by such period.
Duane Moody for News 5.